Hi, welcome. I'm Angela Cates. I'm a pharmacist, functional medicine practitioner, and a mom. And I help parents of children with ADHD and anxiety identify root causes of their child's symptoms through functional medicine testing so their child can thrive. But because I know that it takes a team to get best outcomes for our kiddos, I like to share resources and things that other colleagues are doing that can help as well. So today I want to welcome our guest, Orit Gately, and she's going to tell us a little bit about 504 and IEP plans and how to advocate for your child's unique educational needs. So just a little bit about Orit. She is the founder and education advocate at the Advocate Corner LLC. She has over 20 years of education experience as a teacher and an administrator, and she works with parents who feel lost and overwhelmed navigating the education system, trying to advocate for their children's learning needs. Her passion is to ensure every child feels successful as a learner and every parent feels empowered with an ally in their corner. So your background as a teacher, an administrator, and a mom makes you highly qualified to assist other parents because you can really share the school side of what's going on, but also empower the parents to help advocate for their child. So can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do in your business?
Sure. So like you said, I've been doing this for over 20 years as an educator. And I've now transitioned after seeing the amount of overwhelm and stress that parents experience in the education world, especially as an administrator, both as a building and a district administrator. I noticed that there isn't enough support for parents. And it's not that schools do not want to support the parents. There's just so much going on that sometimes parents are left to their own devices to do their own research. And because there's so much information out there, you don't know always where to start, right? Parents are feeling like, where do I start? Where do I begin? Who do I even contact if I feel something's going on? So that's where I started the Advocate Corner, to be able to empower parents to feel and know that they are an equal part of their child's education team. And that's where I come in. I'm a parent myself of two little girls, and it's always important for me that not only do I show them that I'm empowering myself in my voice, but then eventually when our children see us empowered, they become also empowered themselves because we're teaching them and modeling these skills for them. And that's where I come in. I'm very passionate about children's success. This is why I became an educator. I think that it is our jobs as moms, as parents, to really set our kids up for success, especially their educational trajectories. And we do have a say in that. And that's where I want parents to understand that you do have control of your child's education trajectory. It's just a matter of uncovering and getting clarity on that and feeling empowered by it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that is such a great service and such a needed service. I see so many questions in parenting groups that I'm in, asking about IEPs and 504s and how do you get help for your child at school? So I think this is great. Some children with anxiety or with ADHD, they may need a 504 or an IEP plan. So can you tell us a little bit about what are those plans? What does that mean?
Sure. So there is a difference between the IEP and the 504 plans, right? There are similarities, but there are differences. So this is a great question because it does come up a lot in parent groups. The 504 plan falls under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It is a federal civil rights law to stop discrimination against people with disabilities. So that's what the 504 plan does. Now, an IEP, that stands for an individualized education plan. That falls under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA. And that's a federal special education law for children with disabilities. So now there are similarities and differences between the plans, yet the main difference is that a 504 plan provides accommodations and supports that remove barriers so that students can learn in a regular education classroom. It does not change what they're learning, yet how they're entering the learning. The IEP, on the other hand, is a plan for individualized education, special education. That is where the learning is going to connect and meet a child's unique learning needs so that their learning is designed especially and uniquely for them. Learning goals are attached to an IEP, and the child is closely monitored, which we call progress monitoring, to see if they meet them at the end of the IEP year. And goals are designed at an IEP team, and that's what drives the instruction for the child. There are no goals on the 504, just to clarify that.
Okay, great. So how would I know if my child needs an IEP or a 504 plan?
Sure. So there are multiple factors that actually impact this decision, right? I think sometimes parents think like, oh, my kid needs an IEP when maybe they just need the 504. Or sometimes parents think, oh, my kid needs a 504 when they actually need the IEP. So it includes pediatricians, teachers, and parents' input over the years. Excuse me one sec. Sorry. And how they access the learning, right? So how far behind is your child from grade level peers? How they access their learning and their present levels of performance in daycare or in school. Ultimately, I do tell my clients, you need to go with the mama gut, because I do tend to work with women more than men, but that's not to say that I don't work with the dads. I do work with moms though. And it is the strongest voice inside you that's telling you something's not adding up quite right, even if the daycare or the school says everything's fine. So by speaking to your pediatrician, your child's teachers, your own mama gut, that'll kind of direct you whether or not your child needs to be evaluated for either the IEP or a 504.
Okay. And that kind of leads into the next question. I mean, is there anything required to qualify for an IEP or a 504?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So schools don't just hand them out, right? And I think a lot of parents have actually experienced that it's not always easy to obtain one if they feel their child needs it. So for an IEP, the child can only qualify if they meet at least one of the 13 identified disabilities listed in the IDEA law. If a child is identified to qualify under at least one of those 13, then they can potentially qualify for an IEP. For the 504 plan, the child may have any disability. And I also like to think of it as a unique learning need, whether it's an IEP or a 504. I don't necessarily always like the word disability because we all have varying abilities, right? So that creates, and their unique learning now creates a barrier for them to learn in a regular education classroom where the regular education is the best placement for them. So that's really the difference between the two.
Okay, great. And I think, I agree. The word disability kind of can seem discouraging to some parents, but I think especially like my population that I'm working with, generally it's considered an emotional disability. The anxiety or ADHD can kind of fall under that, I think. Does that sound correct?
It could, but think about children who have ADHD and who have any attention or anxiety challenges. There's a neurodiverse thinking and mental mapping that's just different,
Absolutely.
right? And how they enter that learning and what barriers are blocking them to learn, I believe is how you help, right? Your clients with let's remove the barriers. And then on my end, it's how do we get the school to remove those barriers for the children?
Yes.
So it's in a way almost saying, how do we create a new roadmap so that they can navigate it with the way that they think?
Yes.
And not the roadmap that maybe 80% of the kids in the classroom might be using.
Mm-hmm. And I love how there is, more awareness to this neurodiversity, because in years past, probably when I was in school,
Yeah.
everybody learns one way, everything's taught one way. But now that we've learned not everybody thinks and learns in the same way. And so
Correct.
I think this is just a really great opportunity, like you pointed out, to uncover how does your child learn best and what do they need in place to support the way that they think and they learn.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yes, love the progress we're making on that. So
Yes.
so speaking of these plans, they often include accommodations. And I think parents also have a lot of questions. Well, like either they might be like me when I first went to a meeting, I didn't even go with any accommodations in mind. I was kind of waiting for the school to say, here's what we can do. But I know a lot of other parents are asking, like, what type of accommodations do I ask for? What do I request?
Right.
So how do you help parents figure that out, or what do you suggest for the accommodations?
Sure. So, I feel like the accommodations is one of the biggest questions that get asked, not just on social media and parent groups, but also, potential prospects, clients that come to me, say to me, what accommodations do I need? I just want to know that. And, and I love this question because this is a question parents and clients do often ask, and it's not a simple answer. And it's not a simple answer because it depends on the needs of the child and who they are as a learner and what they need to access their learning and so much more. So think about, we're both women, we're both moms, but how we access our parenting is so different, right? And so we use different skills and strategies in our own homes, and the same things with the child. So what works for you in your home may not necessarily what work for me in my home, and yet we're still both moms, both parents, have 2 kids, right?
Yes.
So it's interesting how what we would use or what we would need is very unique and different to our own children and households, and our kids aren't the same, right? So this is where I can tell you that too often I do see parents fall into this accommodations question pitfall because they ask other parents what accommodations they should ask for their child or agree with what the school recommends, right? Based on a drop-down menu. And sometimes it can be a drop-down menu. And this is the pitfall, right? And these poor parents, they're getting these accommodations. They get this advice and it doesn't align with their child's identity. So now they go to the school meeting and they request these advised accommodations, information that they've been given or what the school's giving them. And again, it's not that anyone's trying to do any harm or ill. It's just, this is just what they know, right? We only know what we know. And then all of a sudden, these accommodations are being implemented, and suddenly negative behaviors start to occur. And I've seen this many times as an administrator, both on the school and the district level. And then these negative behaviors are manifesting in the child. And unfortunately, the child is now seen as a behavior child, and it becomes this vicious cycle. All along, what really needed to happen is that the parent needed to know who their child is as a learner, identify it, get clear on that, communicate that with the education professionals. Let them know this is my child, this is what they need, and ensure that their child's accommodations are truly reflective of who their child is as a person, so that they can remove the barriers and not inadvertently create more barriers. And I think sometimes that happens a little too often than what I'd like to admit, is that more barriers get created versus less barriers. So ultimately, it's really know your child, get clarity on who they are as a learner, what makes them tick, and that's where people like me come in and can support that endeavor.
So it sounds like the accommodations are very personalized. And like you said, even if you have 2 children, maybe 2 boys, both with ADHD, they might need completely different accommodations, even with the same diagnosis, because their learning needs can be different, their personality, their goals, all those things. So, okay, yes, I'm so glad that that's something you're able to help support and help parents come up with. But like you said, as a parent, knowing your child, what works for them,
Yeah.
You've probably helped your child with homework. You can kind of see what doesn't work and what does.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
kind of the more of that information you can observe and share seems to help in the
Correct.
process.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also know the data, know your child's present levels of performance. And if you don't, and data is not always easy to read, get help because
Mhm.
people can help you with that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. Okay, so we've mostly been talking about these plans
Mhm.
for elementary, high school, even I know sometimes in daycare they can be used.
Absolutely.
What about college? What happens when you go to college? Are these kind of 504 and IEP follow you there, or what happens when we get to college?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's another great question because technically they don't follow the child to college. Um, the IEP and the 504 plans that the child may have had in K-12, right, do not follow necessarily into college. But, and there's a big but yet, part here that after high school, Section 504, which is the civil rights law that protects discrimination with children who have disabilities, those accommodations can follow a child to college. So the plan may not follow, but as a child enters college, gets approved, they have conversations with the university to say these were accommodations that I had been receiving in high school, and what can the college do to ensure that I am able to access the learning and remove barriers for me at the college level. And because that is a civil rights law, colleges do address those accommodations in the way that they do it.
Mhm. Okay, great. That's really good to know because I'd hate to see us doing all these supports in high school, and then when you get to college, a whole another level of challenges and difficulty. We want to make sure they're still supported there as well.
Absolutely. And if I can add that there's a lot of work that's done at the high school level, especially with children with IEPs, where they do transitions. So there is a lot of conversations that parents have with the high school for what happens with the child with an IEP after they leave high school. So there are transition plans in place for them.
Okay, great. That's good to know.
Mhm.
Well, what other advice would you give parents as they're navigating this process?
Sure. So I think the last bit of advice, and this is I truly wholeheartedly, not just as a parent and as an educator, but really someone who truly loves children and loves their ability to thrive. The last thing I want to add is that, and I've seen this happen for over the last 20 years, is that if you really feel as a mama gut, in your mama gut, that something's not adding up, or you notice at a very young age that your child is not developmentally aligned with their peers, and you're thinking, wow, my voice is really loud inside me telling me something's not adding up here, don't ignore the voice, okay? Even if people are telling you, oh, they're just a kid, they're fine, they're little, they'll grow out of it. Don't ignore your voice. Go talk to your pediatrician, talk to the daycare, talk to the early learning center, wherever the child is, even if they're home. Get them evaluated. It is absolutely at no cost to the parent to get a child evaluated, whether it's through early intervention or through their home school district.
Mhm.
And the reason why that is so important is that even if nothing comes up, at least you know and you have data and information to say, okay, this is what I know about my child. And if something does come up in the evaluation, now you're able to say, okay, my child is, let's say 3 to 5 years old. Something came up. I can get early intervention. I could get started on various services that my child needs. And the earlier the intervention starts, the more success we see later on and for years to come. It's harder for parents to close a gap after third grade if something comes up for their child versus if they're 3 and 5. And one of the analogies I love to use is that if your child is 3 to 5 years old and something comes up what might take 2 stitches to remediate and to help them with a service may take 10 stitches when they're much older, like 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, right? And the gap now is going to be a lot harder to close.
Mhm.
So just please, if parents feel like, you know what, some things, and we do have very strong mama guts,
Mhm.
get it checked out or reach out to me and give me a call, book a call. We can talk about it and I'll guide you in the right direction.
That's great advice. I think I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So true. I mean, listening to your gut and, the earlier the intervention, the better. It's going to be
Yeah.
easier to address early on, less work to make up if we get the supports and services in place early on. So I love that.
Absolutely. And children so young, and I know sometimes parents come to me and they're like, but what about the stigma? What are other kids are going to think? And you got to remember that when kids are 3 to 5 years old, there's no stigma. They're kids. They just love to have fun. And when an adult
Right.
comes and pulls them out of a class for a service, kids are more like, ooh, why did they get that special treatment? Right?
Right.
Because they're very egocentric.
Mhm.
Whereas they get older, they might be more resistant to being, serviced, but they still need it. And that's an important part. And I know you and I have had these conversations about that stigmatism,
Yeah.
right? Of how parents feel like, oh, wait, but my kid's going to be alienated. That's not what education is today, right? We have come so far from when you and I were at school. And like you said, we only taught one way. That's the way it is. We
Yes.
have different school models right now. We have co-teaching, we have inclusion, we have self-contained, we have so many different variables and ways that classrooms are structured to help kids with various learning needs. And so it's actually a lot more common for kids to respect and help each other and are aware of neurodiversity and neurodivergent learners. And they'll be kinder to them because they're educated by it. So that's a big change also in our education. Plus, as a parent, if we hold off on giving our child the support that they need, our
Mhm.
child still goes into that classroom every day and they're struggling every day. And when they struggle every day and feel like I'm not good enough, I can't keep up, I get yelled at by the teacher because the behaviors are showing up.
Mhm.
That now creates depression and anxiety in our kids. And that's where we have to really think about who's really making this decision. Is it us because we feel our kid is going to be stigmatized, or is it our child,
Mhm.
right? And really having that honest conversation with ourselves of, am I doing what's really best for my child?
Mhm.
And that's the most important part.
Absolutely. Yes, great. I'm so glad you brought that point up that, yeah, we had discussed about the stigma because that, I've heard parents say, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get the 504 plan because then my child's going to be kind of stigmatized and they're going to be pointed out. But I think exactly what you said, ignoring the problem and not addressing it is going to cause the child issues as well because they're going to continue to struggle without getting the support that they need.
Right.
So if people are interested in working with you, if they want help with navigating this process, getting a 504, getting an IEP, or figuring out if that's even needed for your child or what accommodations to ask for, how could they work with you? How can they get in touch with you?
Sure. So there are multiple ways parents can get in touch with me. I do have my website, theadvocatecorner.com, where they can reach out that way. They can look to book a call. I do have a free masterclass. And it's called the 3 steps parents can use to get the schools to listen. 3 steps to getting your child's school to listen. That's the name of it. Sorry. 3 steps to getting your child's school to listen. So it's a free masterclass for parents to look into what is it that I do? What is it that my passion's about? And they can always book a call. I also do have a free Facebook parent group called the Advocate Corner Parent Group, where they can join, log in, get exclusive information and insights about it. And they can reach out to me through that way as well. So I'm happy to be able to, support parents as much as I can.
Okay.
Oh, and on Instagram.
That's
And I have the Instagram, the Advocate Corner account.
okay. And what I'll do, I'll get those links from you and I'll kind of
Sure.
put them in the comments of the show so that people can reach out to you. Joining the Facebook group, that's a great way to also be in community with other parents, because I know for me, I've learned it can really be isolating. And so being able to be with other parents going through some similar things can really help you feel, supported, and not necessarily taking other parents' advice on accommodations, but just getting, that sense of community to support you through the process. So I think that's
Absolutely.
great.
And it's something that I oversee myself. So I know that if questions come up, I'm going to be guiding parents in the best way that I know I can guide them, in an appropriate way based on my experiences, not based on, other reasons or other ways that maybe I heard from somewhere on something that may not be as credible. So that's really important as well for parents to know.
Well, thank you so much for the great information. Thank you for sharing with us what you're doing, and just for all your work advocating for children and helping to empower parents so that they can be part of the team and the process as well.
So, and I really want to thank you for bringing me on, having this conversation, because it really is something that I think how you're supporting your clients with needs and how I support my clients with needs, it really does go hand in hand, and it really does take a village, and parents need to find their village to help them raise their children to be the most successful they can. Yeah.
Absolutely.